Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Fall.
Dr. Michael, how are you this morning? We're recording in the morning.
We are. It's different. Barry, I'm doing very well. I hope you are also. You look wonderful.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Michael. That coming from you, my heart just got warmed. I've been traveling in the fair land of South Carolina. I am back in my fair home in Tallahassee, where it is hotter than whatever.
It's hot.
It's hot. But it's going to be even hotter on the Critical Media Studies Podcast. It's going to be even hotter because we're going to be talking about, Michael, as you know, Rose Horwitch. This is a two-parter. We're going to talk about the decline of reading, the end of reading, which is an essay on post-literacy that was published, I think, in the August, just the most recent the most recent Atlantic Monthly by Rose Horwitch. This is part one of a two-part episode. And this is kind of the run-up to talk about the longer, bigger think piece by Rose Horwitch, where she develops this idea of the end of reading and the ways in which, very interestingly, in Horowitch's description, we're kind of easy, rather than it being a moment of crisis. I mean, it is a moment of crisis and transition. But in a way, if I understand Horowitch's argument, we've kind of been edging on the way. We're a lot like the frog in the proverbial warming pot. Right, in the warm water, that we've and that everyone, not just poor youngsters, not just poor college-age students, but poor 30-year-olds, poor 60-year-olds, everyone who has been immersed or has protracted contact with the enhanced media sphere. We've all been sort of edging into post-literacy.
Right.
We're reading more, and here's the paradox that Horowitch, I think, fully articulates more fully in the second article we're going to talk about, that we're kind of being drawn into by our media environment into a post-literate age. It's been a kind of gradual thing. One of the novel things about Horowicz's argument is that this is not the typical fulmination of an old person. She's a Gen Zer.
Right.
And this is not even the typical fulmination of a Gen Zer against other Gen Zers or against an even younger generation in literacy. What I find interesting, embracing, and I think we'll talk about it even more in the next episode, but we're going to talk about it here a little bit, is that the diagnosis, the post-literate age is all-encompassing, kind of all immersive, and it encompasses different generations. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that her argument is bigger than that. And what's the other thing I was going to say before we begin? Just give me a second. I'm not going to tread too much water. Well, in the interest of not treading too much water, we'll hope that my lost stock comes back when in a moment or two. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. What were we going to be talking about today as a preface to the next episode? We're going to try to keep this episode short as a kind of teaser for the next episode, where we'll discuss Horowicz's notion of post-literacy in depth. But we're going to talk in this episode, we're going to restrict our discussion to an essay that Horowitch wrote basically a year and a half ago, 2024, entitled "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books." And I am going to read and comment on Horowicz's subtitle for this earlier Atlantic Monthly piece in a moment. But after having hogged the limelight and the talking for a while, I'm going to open it up to my distinguished partner to see if they have comments or other introductory points, either about our plan for the next two episodes or about Horwitch in general.
Yeah, no, I think I'm kind of actually eager to get into the discussion. I just want to say, in terms of maybe intellectual logistics here,
Let's do
that
it.
the two articles, the one that we're going to talk about today from November of 2024, really felt like, okay, hey, here's this interesting thing, and then
Sure.
the second that we'll discuss, the more recent one from the Atlantic, um, is I think same focus, same interest, but I think that she shifts her focus to sort of an explanation and application of it. This first one really
Very good.
feels to me
Very
kind of
good.
like grappling with this idea about, hey, what's going on? Maybe why is it happening? And I think that the discussion on post literacy, which I'm really excited to talk about that, just because the distinction between illiteracy and post-literacy, as you had mentioned, she mentions, it's not that we're not reading, it's not that we're not
Not that we're
consuming
not
text.
reading. That's really fascinating.
To me, this
Fascinating.
is more an investigation into our ability to focus, to sustain thought.
Right.
And I think equally interesting is the reaction that the education systems have to it. The response, and how we're managing this and what it says about where we are. So that's it. I think I'd like to just jump in and let's get
Sure.
talking about this.
Sure. So I'll do that in a second. But guess what? You
Huh,
you mentioned my last lost thought,
there we
and
go.
I just want to underscore it because I think it's kind of interesting. It it actually marks the big difference in my mind. It marks the big difference between these two pieces. I think that in the second piece, what Horwitch seems to have realized, and I think this was not a full blown realization or an active thought in this earlier piece that we're immediately going to discuss, but she wrestled in the second piece, she wrestled with what you just mentioned. And that was the other, I think, big thing that's going on, interesting thing that's going on with horror, which is contribution. I think it's the novel element of Horwich's contributions to the discussion of literacy, current literacy, and the possibility that we're in a post-literate age. Um, it's not about literacy per se. It's not about a lack of engagement with words or text. The phenomenon that she is talking about has less to do with an inability to read, an avoidance of reading. People are reading. People are
Hmm.
reading perhaps more. And
Yeah.
also, I think there's the implication that not only are people reading more, they're more skilled. That the level, the dispersion, distribution of reading skills across the population has perhaps reached a global high, a national high, that we have more literacy. But it's the quality of literacy, and in particular it's the quality of attention that, at least in the second piece, she's going to wrestle with and think about what that means, right?
Yeah, and I think we want to be careful not to put the cart before the horse. The big question, one of the big questions for me in the second part is the discussion of attention. I
Right.
think that it plays here. I think it's worth mentioning, but I think we should probably try and focus on
Well, let's
students who can't read.
let's just do that. So we'll have a short discussion. My partner and I will have a short discussion um, uh, about the initial foray of
Yeah.
Horowitz into this. So I'll start it off, Michael, by talking about rereading the title, but also reading the subtitle of the article and making a general comment. And I'd like to hear your
Yep.
comment on my comment. So the title of this earlier piece from 2024 by Rose Horwitch is "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books." Here's the subtitle: to read a book in college, it helps to have read a book in high school. Now, I'm just quick comment on the subtitle.
Hmm.
That subtitle kind of describes the whole tenor of this essay. There seems to be, would you agree with this? I'm presenting this for your agreement or disagreement or expansion. it seems to me that Horwitch in this initial foray is kind of presenting not necessarily an easy fix, but a fix, a solution, so to speak, for the larger crisis of literacy that she's talking about. So, if the problem is elite college students who can't read books, the subtitle carries a kind of hopeful uh, proposal for a solution. That maybe it would have helped these darn college students if they had read a book rather than excerpts of a book
Hmm.
in high school. Now, I think not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I'll just throw this out there. I think one of the interesting things about part two is that Horowitz is kind of questioning the major solution she proffers in this
That's
particular installment, in the first installment of the discussion.
I agree with with that second statement. I don't know that this is her offering a tidy solution. I
Right.
read it a little differently. I think that this is her really offering a slightly wider view of the problem. And maybe that's too, it's just a different side of the same coin. Um, I don't get the sense in here, and I certainly don't get the sense in her follow-up piece that she's looking at a solution. I think she's really identified. To me, in the first point, in the first essay, she identifies the scope of the problem. Second piece is like, hey, I've had a year and a half to think about it. And what I really think is this is why and how and where we are. But
Well, yeah, I'll take that as a friendly amendment to my proposition, and I'm ready to look at a couple comment. No, go ahead and finish your
that's
thought.
it. That's all I have to say. I think that I think we're saying the same thing. The problem isn't that college students are being failed by the colleges and universities. I think the problem is that, hey, we're not reading in college and we're not reading in college because we're not reading in high school. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the angle of vision, the angle of the lens, the
shifts.
perspective shifts.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, I think we talked enough about the presuppositions of this essay. Let's read a couple passages. I'll read a. Here's how we're going to do it.
You tell me, Barry, how are we
This
going to
time,
do it?
here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read a couple. I'm going to cherry pick a couple passages, and I'm just going to present them for your comment first, and probably you're going to exhaust my commentary with your wise
Huh.
remarks, and then we'll just do that a couple times, and then we're going to say we're going to bid our listening audience a fond farewell until next time, where we resume the discussion. I think at a slightly more higher complex level,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so here's so a couple. Um, I won't say they're scare quotes, but a couple sort of meaty quotes that are trying to describe the crisis from experts. And the experts that Horowitz draws upon are, did she graduate from, I forgot to mention this, or I didn't, did she graduate from Columbia University? And that's why the Columbia University
I don't
literature,
think so. I think she's got a graduate degree from Yale and
yeah.
a, um,
Well, we got a lot of Columbia University professors here, creme de la creme,
let's
who
go.
are being interviewed for their thoughts and expertise. And I just wondered if this was an inside job. I was feeling jealous. I see no reference here to Florida State University, so I'm a little bit hurt. But let's continue.
Just to clear it up, earned her undergraduate degree in history from Yale, and then completed her secondary education at a prep school. So yeah, Yale.
Okay. Well, all right. So this is not an insider job, but nonetheless, we have insiders and experts, distinguished professors from Columbia, talking about the problem that they diagnose of their students, of college age students, who increasingly novels are the bugbear. Novels are are used as the key text. Ironically, novels, pleasure reading for the 19th century, entertainment, light entertainment for the 19th century, has now become sort of the bar for, dare I say, high culture,
Hmm.
notions of attention that we think are prerequisites for the appreciation of high culture texts. So now 19th century novels and certainly epics and translations of epics, but even 19th century novels, the long form novel can count as an example of a high culture text that requires a high quality of attention that, according to these professors, and I think we kind of bear this out in our experience in Florida institutional settings, that they're struggling with. College age students, even at the best of schools, are struggling with it. So I'll read some quotes and see if you have some comments. I'll read a couple of them. Okay. And then I'll open it up to my distinguished partner's comments and remarks. So, from Nicholas Doms, who studies the history of the novel, he acknowledged the longevity of the complaint. Part of me, and this is interesting, Doms first begins by saying, hey, haven't we always complained about college age students not being able to do the reading or being unwilling to do the reading? Yeah, we have. But I think Doms feels and Horwitch feels something new is going on here. For one thing, it's not an unwillingness of college age students to read, it's an inability to read. So Doms goes on. Nonetheless, I think there is a phenomenon that we're noticing that I'm hesitant to ignore. 20 years ago, Horwich's summary. Doms's classes had no problem engaging in sophisticated discussions of Pride and Prejudice one week, and poor Dostoevsky, he comes up in several
Hmm.
times, and in this essay, and he's not doing well. And Crime and Punishment the next. Now his students will tell him up front that the reading load feels impossible. It's not just the frenetic pace, Dr. Rapici. The students struggle to attend to small details while keeping track of the overall plot. And then Daniel Willingham, a psychologist of UVA. Let me read one more expert, and then we'll talk about the high school curriculum. And so another expert, psychologist at UVA, Daniel Willingham, writes or reports, quote, the new situation has changed expectations, filling this in students about what's worthy of paying, what's worthy of attention. Quote, being bored has become unnatural. And then Horwitch, reading books, even for pleasure, can't compete with TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. In 1976, about 40% of high school seniors said they had read at least 6 books for fun, compared with 11.5% who hadn't read any. By 2022, those percentages had flipped. Now, before we talk about high school, Horwitch is going to move to high school. And basically, the argument, you already said it, Michael, is that one explanation for this new phenomenon is the fact that in high school, they've already steered away, teachers and instructors have already steered away from using long form text. They've already moved to different modes of presentation, presenting literary text or non-literary text in order to um, educate. But before we get to that, I'll see if you have do you have any comments on this part?
No, I think that if you look at the reasons that are given for why we're not reading,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, it's not the pace, it's the struggle to attend to details while keeping a track of the plot, right? Like we've lost the ability, according to this, to focus on multiple things. We've lost the ability, according to this, to focus on multiple things long term or long form, excuse me. And we're not really good at being bored. So to me, this really speaks, we talk a lot about the attention economy and how beset we are with stimuli. And really, this seems just like the natural output of always being stimulated with, you know, sort of saccharine content. It's mindless. It requires no attention. It requires no investigation. So to me, this is really just a case of being sort of, I don't know, I'll liken it to being physically fit. We're not intellectually fit, right? Like you
Right,
have to
right,
train
right.
yourself to be able to
Absolutely.
run far. You have to train yourself to be able to think and focus. And we are not living in an environment that is naturally doing that. It feels like, according to this, we are being actively untrained.
That's a marvelous metaphor. And with that, that's a marvelous analogy.
Yeah,
And I do think it's about training. And this basically, I think you just articulated the gist of this relatively
sure.
short article, right? The, a diagnosis and description of the problem. College age students aren't able to flex their muscles on long text. And I think you've already, and then Horwitch moves to high school to an analysis of high school training and basically concludes that students aren't being trained to use their muscles, to develop a capacity for the sustained attention that is required for reading long form text. Now, I'm going to immediately segue. I think, Michael, I think maybe we just do two more things, and I think we're done with this episode.
I want to
So the
share. I
oh
want
yes,
to. I
yes,
just this
yes.
is a personal anecdote that is
Uh oh,
really
uh oh.
quite funny because I think it speaks to this issue, right?
Let's do it. Let's do
So
it.
um, I have a middle school age child and a second child in the sort of ending her elementary career, and they got in some trouble recently. And so I told them it was one of those sort of gray area trouble situations where I was like, look, we're going to have to deal with the fallout of what's just happened here. And they're like, "Oh, I don't want to be punished. Don't punish me. Don't punish me." I said, "Look,
We got to deal with it.
I'm not punishing anybody." I said, "I in fact am going to liberate you." And they looked at me and like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You are going to be liberated from the tyrannical oppression of video games and television. I am going to set you free." And you are going, I was like, so you're not punished, right? You are being liberated. You are being freed. And they looked at me like I had three heads. And I said, for the next week, um, I want you guys to just blissfully enjoy your freedom to do anything you want, go wherever you want. I'm not going to tell you to read a book. I'm not going to tell you to practice your instrument. I'm just going to tell
But
you
you are
you've been
forbidden to do
freed.
this.
I said, in fact, this is so incredibly important to me that I'm freeing the whole damn house. We're all free, right? Um, there has been more whining and whinging about how incredibly bored they are. And they've picked it up. Like I'll say they're good sports about it. My son was telling me, he's like, I want just enslave me. He said, I'm tired of this. This is ridiculous. This is absurd. But boredom is simply anathema to the current condition, right?
Wow.
And they'll tell me, like he told me, he's like, look, I don't mind reading. I like reading and I do read. But the minute
But
you tell me I have to read, I
it's a
absolutely
problem.
don't want to read. Just let me do it on my own. And I told him, I was like, I'm not telling you to read anything. In
What a
fact, I think I encourage you to go stare at a beige wall for a while. Like, I'm not telling you you have to do anything. But it's funny because the reaction has not been, I want to play video games or I want to watch TV. The reaction, we have not had that conversation. It's bizarre. We've
that's
had the
really
conversation
interesting.
about just being bored. And
That's
they
interesting.
can't handle, like, it's just such an unnatural state to not be constantly beset by something, right? Now, on the flip side, I've been loving it, man. My house is quiet and, there's just sort of pathetic whimpers from the corners of the house as they try and figure out something to do. But to this generation of people, the idea that you would sit and read a book or you would sit and just think or sit and doodle is really just not compatible with what they know.
Well, Michael, as it turns out, Blaise Pascal diagnosed the situation you described in the 17th century when
Hmm.
he wrote, we had a little break here where I could do a Google
It's so
search.
much
This
better
is
if you
not
just
so.
rattle it off the back of your head.
Where Blaise Pascal, 17th century French philosopher and mathematician, in his Pensées, observed that, quote, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone, unquote. Or, in your case, to stare at a beige wall for hours on end. The problem of boredom is really an existential. It is the for Pascal and also for Montaigne, who he's kind of riffing off of. It's kind of early on has been recognized as the existential
Right.
question. right? So there's that. In other words, this discussion of boredom
Hmm.
and being the besetting problem of attention, the boredom attention nexus, to be continued, because I think that's going to be a theme not only that we'll explore in the next episode, but dare I say it, we'll be talking about this theme until the very end, which hopefully will never come, of the
Well,
critical
I
reading
tell you,
studies podcast.
I,
Yeah,
I will be encouraging my children to buck up because this is something much bigger than them, and they are now just a
that's what
part
you
of a
should.
larger story.
That's what I wanted to say. I just wanted to give you a little child rearing advice, and just
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Blaise Pascal, where he just said, "Hey, it's a bigger problem." Pascal wrestled with this.
Buck up,
Montaigne,
guys. You're not alone.
okay. Who's Pascal? 17th century philosopher and mathematician.
I will
But
say one last little. I do. There's a part of me that really. I don't know whether my kids are very lucky or just cursed. I can't. I'll know in 25 years. I guess it's quite funny though.
but but back to Horwitch
Yes, back.
and our concluding thoughts. So after diagnosing
Hmm.
the situation, talking about the high school pedagogy that she believes is is not the sole factor, but a major factor in creating this so-called crisis in literacy, or crisis, which isn't a crisis in literacy, but a crisis in long form attention. Um, a horror which ends with a couple claims about the importance of reading books, right? And so let me read them, and let's comment, and we'll close it. So first comment. Uh, these comments near the close of this short piece, Horwitch is sort of affirming her faith in, I think, how would you describe it? Traditional literacy, the power of traditional literacy. This is a traditional defense of reading, right? So books can cultivate reading books,
Well,
reading long form books can, well, let me read the quote,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then,
yeah.
yeah, I'm going to let this open for your comment. But her comments are, books can cultivate a sophisticated form of empathy, transporting a reader into the minds. Here's a defense of reading: transporting a reader into the mind of someone who lived hundreds of years ago. And then she quotes Berkeley professor Victoria Kahn, who teaches Renaissance texts, and used to be at Princeton, actually, but has been in Berkeley for many years. A lot of contemporary ideas of empathy are built on identification, identity politics. Reading, however, Kahn affirms, is more complicated than that. So it enlarges rather than narrows, is the implication. It enlarges your sympathies. And then finally, let me just read this last quote, and then I'm going to open it up to you, and you're going to close it out, Michael. So in this affirmative mode, Horwitch ends the piece by saying, but of course, there is a reason that despite millennia reinterpretations, we still return to things like Greek mythology and to the tales of Homer. Very timely nod to Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, and the craze to see a 70 millimeter IMAX showing of The Odyssey. There is a reason for this: to understand the human condition and to appreciate human horror, which is unbowed, right? This is the closing sentence of the piece. To understand the human condition, to develop your empathy, right? To understand the human condition and to appreciate humankind's greatest achievements, you still need to read the Iliad. Dash. All of it. All of it,
Hmm.
Dr. Michael. All of it. Not just an excerpt.
I think that the problem, and in the interest of brevity, I think we sort of skip past this, but I want to jump back one little
Sure.
hop
Sure.
and read a section just before she concludes by
Please do.
saying that we have to read
Please do.
everything.
Please do.
Because I think this is an interesting thing. We focus so far on this issue about like, hey, we're beset with multiple stimuli and our attention is focused and we're not exercising the patience or the deliberateness to hone in and strengthen this sort of habit. But she says here, over and over, the professors I spoke with painted a grim picture of young people's reading habits. The historian Adrian Jones was one dissenter, but allowed, quote, my experience is a bit unusual because the University of Chicago is like the last bastion of people who do read things. For years, Dames has asked his first years about their favorite book. In the past, they cited books such as Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. Now he says almost half of them cite young adult books. Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson seems to be a particular favorite. So it's actually, I just want to introduce a little bit of nuance before we bug out. On one hand, we're reading less, we're reading snippets, we're not taking on the full book. So we can sort of comfort ourselves in saying, well, we're still reading high level writing. We're still reading, valuable, deep thought. We're just doing it in smaller bites. But this points to a bigger problem, which is not only are we reading shorter excerpts, we're also reading less complicated,
Oh, that's
less
interesting. That's interesting.
engaged, less difficult texts. And I think that speaks to a different problem, right? Like we are not facing the problem of, oh my God, students don't know how to read. We got
Yes,
that. And it's not a situation where, oh my God, students aren't reading. No, we are. We're consuming mass amounts of text.
right.
The
Maybe
problem
more than
is,
ever before. Maybe
yeah,
more than
I
ever
think
before.
without question, the
Cross gen
problem is,
that's transgenerational. That's not
yes,
just young people. That's
the
transgenerational.
the problem is the depth and complexity. And we're seeing the depth and complexity eroded on two fronts. One, shorter snippets. So when we do go deep and complex, it is for a number of pages rather than hundreds of pages. And second, when we do sit down for anything that sort of involves an extended period of time, the pool is much shallower. And so if you take Horwich's position that, hey, we still need to read the entire book, then it needs to be the Iliad. It can't be the graphic novel version of this, if you will.
Right, right.
That we're
That's
moving,
important. That's an important point too, for
yeah,
especially for critical media studies. This is an argument for the power and the necessity of print literacy, really.
yes, we're moving backwards on two fronts. And when she revisits this a year and a half ago, a little preview for what's to come. Young adult fiction is the thing. If you're going to talk to people who read, that's where they're reading. And it's not young adults reading it, it's everybody reading it. So we are, I think, seeing a regression on two different fronts, or at least in two different degrees, than as opposed to just saying, hey, we're reading fewer, less. We're not reading the whole book, we're reading excerpts. It's more than that, which I think is interesting and problematic.
Partner Dr. Michael Rapici, that is a wonderful setup for our next episode. And how about we leave it there for now?
Indeed. I'm looking forward to the next part of this, Barry. This is going to be fun.
I
As
agree.
long as we can pay attention long enough to actually
As
pull
long
up.
as you can pay attention to it, and hopefully I'm going to find some way to bring in Pascal on the next episode. I bet it won't be as hard as it looks.
Oh no,
Take care.
yeah, absolutely. Have a good one, Barry. Thank you.
Take care.